Mr. Clay Hepler, welcome to the podcast, my friend. Really excited that you're here.
Great to be on here. I was thinking right before we got on here that I have a squeaky chair, so I think that your services could be incredibly useful because for podcasting, right? It's not great to have a squeaky chair.
Well, maybe I can
business, right?
Maybe I can sell you a high quality chair after the podcast. Let's see.
There we go. Great.
Yeah, so really honored you're here. I'm really excited. We're actually just meeting each other, and I'm really interested in learning more about your background and how we can talk to the audience and get the most out of you today. So I guess let's start with just a little bit of your background. Tell us about how you got here, what you're up to, and let's start there.
Yeah, I think that, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast because I like what the title of the podcast is, The Rich Equation. And sometimes we, especially now in sort of the era that we live in, that word is kind of taboo, right? Like being rich, living richly, having a rich life is sometimes thought pejoratively. And so I like that you first talked about the rich equation. So my rich equation is, starts with, as you said, my background, right? So I was, working for the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I was convinced that I was going to work in the State Department for my entire life. That's the reason why I went to the college I went to. I speak, multiple foreign languages. I was driven to do that. And I had the opportunity to do it, and it was very disappointing. It was very disheartening. There was no equation to it. There was no okay, if I do something really good in this specific way, it's more of a time investment than it is a meritocratic sort of environment. And that's not to say that every governmental organization is like that, but in this case, at that time, I felt like it was very stifling. So what I did was I took some time off of school. I didn't know that it was going to be some sort of indefinite time away from school because I haven't graduated yet. But I joined my family business, which is luxury chocolate, right? And so the family business when I was there was really a very small business, and I took the business from 2 to 42 states in 18 months. And this is using cold calling. This is building relationships specifically with small businesses. So I cut my teeth in sales and marketing and found that I had a knack for it. And along those same lines, I met a gentleman that was a very successful businessman. He was worth, probably about $120 million. And at that point, I got the opportunity to see the rich equation in real life, right? I met this guy, and you're right. He talked to me about a family office, right? Like wealthy people just do things differently. He had a team of accountants, attorneys, advisors, and he told me that, hey, Clay, in order to be very wealthy, you don't put your money in a 401k or an IRA. Because I was talking to him about, the millionaire next door, like scrimp, save, delay your way to wealth, which is like, if you want to play a game of the 90s or the 80s and wait until you're 60 years old and realize that because of inflation, your money is actually totally useless in these retirement accounts. And we can go into that later. But he said the way to get financially abundant and free is through purchasing things that produce cash flow. And we know this, through people like Warren Buffett. Like people say, oh, well, Warren Buffett goes and buys, companies he's a stock investor. And so we should be stock investors. Actually, he has so much liquidity and power that he goes in and buys these companies and has a minority but incredibly large share, and he can control the direction of these companies. So he is essentially like a venture capitalist, a late stage venture capitalist that goes in and repositions these companies. So I learned from this guy that you should buy real estate. You should buy assets that produce cash flow. Businesses are incredibly attractive. Real estate was one of the things that just made sense to me at that time. So what I did was I kind of got away from the family business, joined a firm locally here, and I started helping them grow their business. I helped them grow their real estate business. And in our first year of wholesaling and flipping, we did about 60 houses, a little more than 60 houses. And we were incredibly successful. And what I did was I did marketing, I did sales, I did dispositions. for that company. And it was incredibly enriching. And during that time period, I was also investing on the side. So I purchased a 3-unit house hack. I bought another building, and I acquired 13 units in a little over 13 months. And when it's stabilized, I have a 6-unit now. I will be light financially free. And so this goes back to the beginning of this conversation. My mentor said, go and buy real estate, go and buy assets, and you will become free. Well, it would have taken me 30 years to get the amount, like compounded, put your money in a 401k IRA to get the cash flow that I got in 13 months. It was just by buying real estate smartly and renovating it. And there's been a lot of headaches. There's been a lot of things that have gone wrong along the way, but it really goes to show the power of investing in businesses and assets and having the right mindset and perspective along the way. So what I do now, and this is to kind of sum up my background, is I have a podcast called The Creative Capitalist. I have a newsletter that is jointly with the podcast. And basically we talk about specific strategies that wealthy people implement in their life, whether it's buying businesses, buying real estate, using specifically designed whole life insurance, which we could talk about later if you'd like. And I implement it and help people set those strategies up as a warehouse for their money. And that's what I do now. So I know that was a lot, and I can be long-winded, but I hope that it was valuable.
Well, what I love about what you're doing is, and you talk about this on your podcast, you're really helping people understand their relationship with money, what to do with their money, how to invest their money, and be smarter about their strategies. And one of the pillars of the rich equation is income. So it's important to, and I know they talk about this in Go Abundance as well, like vertical income and horizontal income, and how we can be smarter about how we invest our money. I want to ask you a couple questions about that just for you. Like what is it that, was there something in your life or a part of your life that really shifted about how you started thinking about money? Or was it education? Was it like a real challenge or disappointment about how you started thinking about your relationship with money? Let me ask you that.
Sure. I mean, do you have 3 hours?
Yeah, we can go.
Right?
We can go as long as we want.
This is a complicated question, because what happens when you start to shift your mindset is that you regress to the mean. This is a standard neuroscience, a principle of neuroscience that, we have grooves in our brain that when we repeat the same pattern habitually, whether that's a speech pattern, it's a physical kinesthetic pattern, it's a pattern of writing, it's a pattern of interaction or whatever. Yep. We have grooves in our mind that repeat this pattern. And so just as our grooves can be a speech pattern, a way of interacting or lifting weights or whatever, we have patterns of thinking. And so one of the most important pattern of thinking to interrupt is scarcity versus abundance, right? And so, I'm gonna profess here that I've gotten out of a lot of my scarcity, but it still comes up. Mm-hmm. And one of the best ways that I found to get out of scarcity is actually get out of yourself. Interact with people that are playing on different levels. And I know this is so cliche, but you gotta bear with me, because we want to change who we are and how we think about our finances, wealth building. But we first have to go out and see, how do other people do this, so we can model and modify that in our specific life. I had my partner, I was, acting in scarcity a while ago. And I said, in order to do this, we were talking about our goals and dreams. We did this sort of Christmas morning exercise. Like, if you could have anything in your life, what would you do? Would you have this beautiful, and we could talk about this exercise later, but would you have this beautiful, chalet in Switzerland? Would you travel 365 days a year? What would you do for your kids? And all these really inspiring things,
yep.
right?
Yep.
And at the end of that, my fiancé, which is, she's amazing. I mean, she's great. And she said, okay, when can this happen? And my brain right away said, well, I don't know, it could, 30 years from now or 40 years. And so what happened was I was playing in a different framework, a different frequency at that point. I was playing in a frequency of abundance or of scarcity. And she said, why couldn't you just make $10 million next year? because I said, well, you want to have $10 million investable, right? And I go into all these, like nuances of what you have to have, and right, like when you think about personal finances a lot and wealth building, you go into these sort of, okay, I need this for this, and she's like, why couldn't you do it? And I looked at her, and I was like, I didn't have any, I couldn't say anything. Right? Yeah. What are you gonna say?
Good question.
Because she looked at me and she said, "I believe in you as a person. I believe in you as my husband to be. I believe in you as my partner, and I challenge you to think differently about that." So this is a narrative to just go to show to you and say,
it broke the pattern.
Right. It broke the pattern, and you have to ask the right questions. So I know I
love it.
Maybe another cliche, but it's asking the right questions.
What is for you, and I asked you this before the podcast, is like, what are some of the things that you don't talk about a lot, and what do you wish to share? Like, what is your investment philosophy now, and why is it so different?
Yeah. So it takes a while for us to sort of reprogram our minds and think as wealthy people think. We're taught to diversify. We're taught to, put our money in a retirement account, and you'll be safe from the market if you have some bonds and some, Ray Dalio came out with this really famous book, Principles. He talks about the all-weather portfolio and all these sort of asset allocations, which is great. But if you're young and you don't come from a lot of money, and this is not just for me, this is like the wealthiest people in the world say, diversification is diversification. If you want to build wealth, you have to focus on a specific thing that you're good at, that's a part of your core investor DNA, that's a part of your area of competency that you can invest fully into. That's the way to build wealth. Diversification is a way to maintain wealth. It's a way to sustain wealth. And that's a part of the rich equation, right? That's a part of how we continue to stay financially solvent. But if you want to build wealth and you have nothing, you have to focus. And so, my strategy is, and I will give complete kudos to Nassim Taleb, he's a tremendous trader, famous trader. He has a bunch of books about randomness and investing and sort of that philosophy, but it's a barbelled strategy of investing. What does that mean? Well, it means that I have a lot of my core assets in safe things, or a lot of my cash, in safe things like life insurance. I have a lot of money in just whole life insurance. It's going to give me a 4 to 6% return that I feel very, very comfortable in. That's guaranteed, right? And then I have more speculative investment. I actually believe real estate is not even that speculative for me, because I know real estate. I'm in real estate, and I buy it with I have adequate cash reserves. I buy it on good fundamentals, and I don't over leverage. So, that's a part of my barbell. That's the one side of my barbell. And then I have other sides of my barbell. That's like, I have some cryptocurrencies, and like, I don't have any like dog coins, right? I don't have like Shiba or Inu coins or anything like that, but I have some, cryptocurrencies, and I'm interested in getting into, business ownership, buying businesses, things like that. And I would view that as, even though it's kind of a boring, sweaty business, because I would only go after those. I'm not going for a tech startup, but I would view that as more of a speculative investment. So in other words, a barbell strategy of having my core assets and things that I know, and then I have another kind of a heavier side, if you will, that's more speculative, that is in things that are maybe a smaller percentage of my portfolio, but they have a larger opportunity to grow.
I love that. So do you think that, you're a pretty young guy and you're learning this stuff pretty young, which is beautiful and a great gift. A lot of people go through their life at 40, 45, making a lot of wrong money mistakes, a lot of wrong decisions about money, and ends up programming their behaviors about money. And is it too late at some point? Is it too late to fix or change? Is it better to do things? Obviously things are better to do early, which is why we have this podcast, so we could be learning things early on in our life as soon as possible. Talk to me about time.
Right. So time is a really beautiful thing. And if you're under 40, then you are a time billionaire, right? Like you have, there are financial billionaires and there's time billionaires. And really what money does is money gives you more time. It gives you the ability to leverage people, products, media to give you more opportunity. So I don't think that there's ever, like, if you're 70, you can't make it, right? Like I got financially free in 13 months. You can do it in a very short amount of time. I don't think it's ever too late to do anything. And I think that that's also a limiting mindset. If you listen to podcasts like this and you really commit and take action, I think that you could do it at any age. We are in the age of opportunity. So I think that you could find something that can propel you to, if you're committed to financial abundance.
What is some advice that you find yourself giving the most to people?
I think the advice that I find myself giving the most to people is focusing on larger time increments. So, we live in a very instantaneous economic climate. So we can, get Ubers to go to the hotel, or we can get Uber Eats and our food is fast. Like sometimes I go to a restaurant and I think like, it's going to be 45 minutes before I get my food. What the heck? And that's conditioned in who we are in the world that we live in. And it's very, very hard for people to look at longer time horizons. And if you look at the best investors in the world, the happiest people in the world, they actually can look out and bring their present experience and say, I understand that in 10 years or 15 or 20 years, this is going to be worth way more. This is going to be the right decision. This is like, they researched this, the Stanford Marshmallow Test, right? It's about delayed gratification and looking in long-term. And for the listeners that don't know, this is like a test in like 1972 conducted at Stanford of these adolescent children.
Yeah, I do this. I did this with my kids.
Oh, no way.
I did it with my kids, but you explain it and I'll tell you my experience.
Okay. So, basically they don't even prep the kids. They say, hey, if they give them like some pretzels or something, and they say, hey, if we come back in, we'll come back in a little bit. And if we come back, we'll give you 2 marshmallows or something. Right. And, some of the kids waited and they didn't tell them the exact amount of time that they would come back. And then some of the kids just like grabbed and ate. Well, there was like 1 marshmallow and they say, we'll give you 2 if we come back.
That's right.
Some of the kids were just like, grabbed the marshmallow and they were like, I don't care. I just want this marshmallow now. And then other kids had the self-discipline in the ability to delay gratification to the researchers came back. And so, as you know, the ending to this, what happened was they followed these kids for their entire life. And the people at that age, the kids at that age that effectively delayed gratification were more successful in every single life category.
I know.
We're talking SAT scores. We're talking, ability to hold marriage. We're talking weight. I mean, we're talking like all measures of life satisfaction and success. They won. They statistically just kicked the butt out of the other ones that couldn't delay gratification.
What's really funny is, and I love that you mentioned that, because it's really interesting how in this world we are built to be impatient. And yet everything around us is about impatience, right? Like we get everything we want almost instantly. And you mentioned it about getting food in 45 minutes. Like you're freaking right. Like everything is instant except wealth. The only thing in our life. And right now what's really amazing is like there are people making $1 million on some stupid cryptocurrency in a heartbeat. And it's like changing the patterns of how people think about money, because now like your buddy over there just made $400,000 in a weekend because he bet on something he had no idea about, and all of a sudden he made that much money. But I don't think that stuff is sustainable. So that's going to be fun to see what all this happens. But The only thing you cannot get instantly is wealth. And I start to think about business and wealth creation, and I, again, really love what you said, is that the wealthiest people in the world are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. They're not 35. They're not 24. They're not 36. Like, it takes time. No matter how big or successful your business is, in order for it to compound, it just takes time. And regarding the marshmallow exercise, I did that with my kids. I'm really proud to say they both held on to 5 marshmallows. So I started with, I told them, I think I said, you can eat 1 now, or I'll give you 3 more and you can have 4. And they both sat there at 1 year old and 3 years old, and they both sat there and waited for 4 marshmallows. And I've done it a couple times. I've done it with pretzels. I've done it with games. I've done it with, other kinds of candies and things like that. And they're starting to learn it. But, even as kids in this technology-driven world, there's a high level of impatience. Everybody wants everything now, food now, mommy now. I want to sleep, nap now. I want milk now. And so I love how you're talking about this, because it's really critical that we break these patterns.
Yeah, it's incredibly critical. And also, Ashish, that, America highlights the winners. And so I try to use mental models to approach my life, as much as I can, right? And I'm learning more and more about it. But there's something called survivorship bias, right? So what we do is we inherently, when we look at someone who succeeds, like the guy that made Snapchat, or Zuckerberg, or, Musk, all of these incredibly successful tech entrepreneurs, we say, the sexy startup is the way to get wealthy. Well, what you don't see is the majority.
That's right.
The majority, like the gross majority of these people get their VC funding, they get pumped, Series A, Series B, Series C, Series Z, right? They just keep pumping them with capital so that they can succeed. And a lot of times they just burn out. And so the boring, sweaty business, the wealth building business that takes a long time, that's sustainable, is the way to go. And one little additional tangent related to this is I follow an Indian entrepreneur named Naval Ravikant, and he is just like, I think the world of him. I think he's one of the wisest people in modern media. He's like a venture capital philosopher. And he talks about, you want to be successful by your decisions. If you had 1,000 other lifetimes, you want to be wealthy and successful and happy in all these 1,000 other lifetimes. What does that mean? That means that the decisions that you make should be based in first principle thinking, fundamentals, and basically a conservative approach to your investing. Like, getting rich on Shiba coin is great, but like, you wouldn't get rich on Shiba coin in 999 other lifetimes. So you want to focus on the boring stuff that's sustainable and as you said, the long-term growth, right? That gets you wealthy.
I love that. Tell me about what is really driving you? What is your mission? What is Clayton, what is he going to do in 10, 20 years? Why build all this wealth?
Yeah, I think at my core, it's, a part of it's from fear, right? Like, I saw that my family lost a lot of money when I was younger in the crash 2008, and they're still recovering, even though there's a industrious business that we have. It's, they're still recovering. There's a lot to recover from that. I think the core part of it is like, I'm very afraid to not be financially well off. And, outside of that, I think that when you get to a certain point, we as human beings, we're very altruistic creatures, and it's actually built within us to give back and to give back to people. So my vision for my business is I've seen my mother struggle as an entrepreneur, not have access to information, not have access to people, to knowledge. And I want to build a resource that can help people like her, or help other people get to financial freedom, faster. There's a lot of other stuff there, but I think that on the top
I love it.
And
I also commend you because you're not just doing it for yourself. You're sharing the information. You're obviously learning yourself by doing all this work, but also you're sharing it with people, which that's what it's all about. Tell me about your daily routine. How do you sustain and perform at this high level at a high frequency?
I think I should ask you this. Right?
Why?
Because you're the biohacker.
Well,
right?
why do you think I'm asking you so I can hack and cheat from you, brother? Okay. This is why I'm so
right. I think that I listen to a lot of people that are like 15x smarter than me, and so like one of the people that you and I briefly discussed before the podcast with Huberman Lab podcast. So I really structure my day in parts of sprints of working. And I'm very sensitive to light, right? So I wake up in the morning pretty early. I do sort of a morning routine, not super formal. I do some meditation, transcendental meditation, some journaling, some focusing for the day, but really I'm trying to focus on my tasks. And then for the next 90 minutes, I go all out on a specific task. So my morning time is, when efficiently allocated with focus, it's incredibly productive. You would be amazed what you can achieve in 90 minutes without interruptions. And that's rare nowadays. I'm sure you know this, being a multi-level entrepreneur, real estate guy, it's not easy. So in the morning, that's when I get a lot of my stuff done. And then throughout the day, I make sure that I have, times that I can be focused. I use something called the Pomodoro Technique.
I've never heard of that.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a time productivity, energy sort of management technique. I don't really know how to describe it, but basically you have a timer that you put on for 25 minutes, and then you have a 5-minute break, and then you put a 25 minutes and 5 minutes, and then after 3, you have a 25 minute and then 15 minute. And I guess it's meant to mimic our ability, because as human beings, it's very hard for us to focus for prolonged periods of time.
Yes.
So it allows us to rest our brain and give ourselves a break. So what I'll do in the 5 minutes, Ashish, is I will just, walk, not really do a lot of tech stuff. I'll walk around, I'll go to the bathroom, I'll drink some water, and then I'll come back and focus. And what that does is, if you're working for a longer bout, say you have like a 3 to 4 hour period of time that you're just like, I'm gonna just focus. What that does is it gives your brain a break, and it's been incredibly effective for me. Wow. For longer periods of sustained focus.
I love meeting high performers like you because it just jacks me up, baby. It's like, all right, get me off this podcast so I can start doing creating some massive impact. I love it.
And let me just say one last thing. Like, I also work long.
Yeah.
So I think that, right, it's like these hacks are great, but you got to work long. You got to work hard and long hours. It's just, there's no other two ways about it.
I think hacks are interesting. People look for hacks as cheats, but you're right. There's not really a cheat. You got to put in the work. You got to put in the effort. I think the hack is just trying to find efficiency. It's not, my dad always not criticize me, but he always tells me, he's like, what it takes you to do 1 hour takes me 4 hours. Just based on how we are efficient, right? Like how we work on the computer, how we can do things in Excel, or how quickly we can learn and adapt and adjust. Nowadays, a young kid can do what I can do in an hour, he can do it in 30 minutes, right? So my goal is to figure out how to do it in 45 minutes instead of 30 minutes, because I may not be able to do it in 30 minutes. But it's like always trying to find ways of being more efficient and then also smarter, right? We talk a lot about like health, and we talk about nutrition and energy and all that. Like there's a lot of preconceived notions and bad information out there. And so we're trained and programmed in all these things over our entire lifetime. Like, what are the things that we can really hone in on and find more efficiency in?
That is such a good point. I heard this from James Clear, who's the author of Atomic Habits. And when you think about, like, we're going to be successful if you put the time in and you really work hard, you're going to be successful. It's just a matter of time. You got to be patient. But at the end of the day, if you're patient, you're going to be successful. One of the most helpful metaphors that I've come across when thinking about like performance over prolonged periods of time is we all have average speeds. So if you're going at, say, 83 miles an hour and you could be going at 90 miles an hour, like just with a couple of little tweaks or being more thoughtful about your work environment, like you think that they're nuanced, but like you got to work hard. But these extra tweaks over a long journey, the difference between 83 and 90 miles an hour is absolutely huge. So it's just about getting those slight edges during your days and being more thoughtful about that. So that's a helpful metaphor that I've always employed.
What keeps you up at night?
Oh, I sleep pretty soundly, but stuff that I'm anxious about, failure, right? Like, not being able to live up to my expectation and my enthusiasm, right? Like I'm very enthusiastic about, my vision for where I want to take my family, the impact that I want to have on the world. And, failure can happen. And so, what keeps me up at night is not achieving my potential and not being able to, give the life that I want to give to my family.
I love that. Well, one of the things that I've learned about you and watching you and also just talking to you is like, you're very aware of these things. And so even if you think that failure is what's keeping you up at night, the fact that you're aware about it, you're not going to really ever look at a failure like a failure. It'll just be like a stepping stone or some lesson. It'll be painful perhaps in the way that you're framing it today, but most people have that spark, right? That, and you can just, one entrepreneur knows another where whatever it takes, you're going to find a way to succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not a matter of how, it's a matter of when.
It's a matter of when. Yeah. I guess as we wrap up, let me ask you, final question is for you, what does it mean to live a rich life?
Ooh. That's a really, really thoughtful question. I think for me, I have a plan on paper that I want to implement, right? The plan of helping my parents retire, helping my fiance's parents retire, giving them a life, showing them how much I love them. I have this vision of like, my mother loves Italy. She loves Lucca. She before my parents lost everything, she had this trip to Lucca, which is, I think it's in southern Italy. I probably should know this, but she talks about it all the time still. And she rented this little like cabin in a vineyard, and when she talks about it, she smiles, and it really brings her so much joy to think about her time there. And she talks about the time that she went into the restaurant and had all the locals that, crowded around her, and there was no other Americans, and it was just like really like culturally enriching experience. And I want to give that to her.
Beautiful.
That's one of the things. I mean, and also giving a rich life is being able to live with abundance, provide for my family, and really give back to the world, because I think that's one of the reasons that I'm here.
You're special, dude. I really have enjoyed talking to you and learning more about you. I wish you a lot of success. I guess if people want to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best way to do that? And tell us how we can listen to the podcast and all that.
For sure. I mean, the really good place is The Creative Capitalist. I don't know if the name's as good as The Rich Equation.
I like The Creative Capitalist. I like that.
Yeah, right. It's good. I think they're pretty. So that's a great, guys. It would mean the world if you checked it out. I hope that it would provide value to you. My website is Creative-Capitalist. You can sign up for the newsletter there. You can learn a little bit more about exactly what I'm doing with helping entrepreneurs. And I'm on social, Clay Hepler, every single social except for TikTok. Not on that one yet. And you can reach me at clay@creative-capitalist.com.
Dude, pleasure to meet you. Thanks for sharing so much knowledge. I really encourage all the listeners to reach out to this kid. You're going to do some amazing things. Really appreciate you sharing, and have a great day.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.